am super here for travel and going and seeing new things and doing cool shit as a disabled person and challenging all of the stereotypes and perceptions and all that good stuff. I'm here for it. I am not here for travel like airport experiences because really airports generally are a place of trauma for me, and it might sound dramatic to say that, but I think people often don't understand or see the nuance that is happening when they are working with disabled people in places like airports. So this week we traveled to Johannesburg and we went via Lanseria Airport. There's a reason that we don't travel through Lanseria Airport. We had an experience 10 years ago, and I will share. We thought that it would be different now because it's 2025. But we learned that things are not different, it is the same. So I want to share the story and get some thoughts and share some thoughts and just have a conversation because I think a lot of the time disabled people when we travel, you don't hear this side of the story. We kind of try to focus on the positive things and the fun of travel, but there is a lot of work in it and there's still a lot of work to be done to make it seamless and positive and sensical for all of us involved. So stick around if you want to hear my Lanseria Airport drama. The first thing I would tell people about traveling as a disabled person is to learn the policies of the airports and of all of the different service providers that you have to engage with when you're a wheelchair user trying to travel. These are really important because often people will try to tell you things and say oh, we have to do this because it's policy, and sometimes it is the policy, sometimes they're bullshitting you, and so it feels really good when you can say to a flight attendant when they're telling you that they have to do it this way because the policy, and you can be like, well, actually, this is what the policy says, so you are going against policy, and to see that face of a human is that's a sweet joy. But sometimes it is the policy, and sometimes we need to raise questions about why that is. So here's the story. We used to travel to Lanseria, and 10 years ago-ish, we had an incident where my mom was not allowed onto the PAU truck with me. They said that they have trained paramedic professionals who can assist me. So my mom was not necessary or required to be on the PAU truck with me, which is madness in itself. I remember it was a late night flight and we were unimpressed at this point. Ultimately, my mom came onto the PAU because they didn't know how to work the wheelchair and they also could not find my seat belt. So that was 10 years ago. And my mom raised the issue with their airport manager and got feedback from their security safety board committee team, whatever. And fundamentally they said that we need to inform them when we are coming to the airport because clearly we are problematic people. We need to inform them that we're coming, and they will allow my mom as my assistant person to come onto the PAU with me. But the problem that they have is with the lift that goes up and down into the truck. That's where the safety hazard is. So she's allowed to come into the PAU with me as long as her non-disabled self, gets into a wheelchair to go down the lift. That is madness. That's bananas. That you have to disable yourself to stand, well, not stand, to be on a lift to go down when the PAU assistant people are not getting into wheelchairs. It is unreal. So we were like, okay, that's insane. We are gonna just avoid this airport. Other airports don't do that. Sometimes you are allowed to make a choice that's just easier, and so we just avoided Lanseria Airport for about a decade. This week we ended up flying through Lanseria, and because it's 2025 now, we thought that it would be different, and things have been upgraded because we had the World Cup and stuff. You know, progress happens in a decade. I think it's also important to remember that Lanseria Airport is not an AXA airport, so they are a private airport and have different rules and regulations and standards and policies. And I think this is why we don't travel through private airports, because of this kind of drama. And it may seem little, but I think things in disabled life and advocacy as disabled people, it's the little things that really get under your skin because they're nonsensical. And common sense is really helpful in situations where we're dealing with disability, but there has to be awareness and logic. So, you might think that we're being dramatic right now, but when we landed at Lanseria Airport, my mom came into the PAU. They don't say anything about this stupid disable yourself, get in a wheelchair rule when we get on. So they close the door to the plane, and so we're in the PAU, and my mom wouldn't get in the wheelchair on principle, and I'm backing that 100%. And so the guys who are like trying to get us out of the PAU, they took me out. No worries, I'm sitting on the tarmac, and now we're standing with my mom at the top of the lift, and they won't bring it down because she wanted to get in the wheelchair. And they're saying that if she doesn't get in the wheelchair, they can't bring her down. But if they bring her down and she's not in the wheelchair, then they're gonna lose their jobs because they're not listening to the safety policy and regulations. So Mom was like, I will go to your manager and tell them that I am the problem so that you don't lose your jobs. So it was a whole drama. We stood there for like 7 minutes while they were like, is this woman really not gonna get in the wheelchair? And she did not. So they eventually let the lift down, and magically my mom stayed on her legs. No safety was impeded, and then we had to fly back home the next day. So we were kind of prepared for the drama, and there were a couple of things that made me mad about this whole scenario. First of all, I, as a disabled person, have a right to have my assistant people or the people who are traveling with me to be with me when I'm traveling and going anywhere in the airport or like to the planes. Secondly, there needs to be room for what is the best option for me as a disabled person. It should be my comfort and safety and comfortability, I guess, that is at the center of those policies. The thing that annoyed me with this whole situation this week was that they have a PAU truck, and that's fine, important, but they also have upgraded to have not the stairs they go up to the plane doors, they have a ramp, which is magical, and we use it in Bloemfontein all the time. So I'm thinking that that's a really good option and solution where you don't need to have this whole drama with the PAU, because you can just put my wheelchair at the bottom of the ramp and take me up the ramp in a slipper chair, which is generally what happens at other airports. So we have a whole discussion at check-in. I've checked in online because with Sapphire you can as a disabled person. No other airlines really allow you to check in online as a disabled person. That's a whole other video I can make. So we checked in online, but we went to talk to them and be like, listen, we don't need to use the PAU because there's a ramp. So that's awesome, let's do that. So they were like, cool, we'll figure it out. And when we got to the boarding gate, they came back and they were like, we just want to confirm that this is the option that you would like to go with. So I was like, yes, that's the option I would like to go with, thank you. So we don't have to have this whole spectacle of non-disabled people getting into wheelchairs so they can be safe. So then another person who works at the airport, I don't know what her role was, but she came to us to clarify again what was happening and what I wanted. So she termed it as, are you not comfortable with using the PAU truck with this whole situation? And I'm like, no, I'm not comfortable. Which is great, like that's really good language to use, because that centers it around me and my experience as a disabled person. So because I've used the ramps and things before, I'm like, this is beautiful, like they're being so considerate. And then they came back and they were like, listen, there's a concern from the medical people here that the ramp is not safe because it's steep. And they've had incidents before of people having issues. So they would prefer for me to go into the truck because it's safe to cross. I don't know. So then they said that it's fine for my mom to go up the ramp and for me to go in the PAU. We need to get real for a hot second, because all of this is being put in terms of safety. First of all, no airports around the world have this policy. It's only the private airports in South Africa where they force people to get into wheelchairs to get into the PAU, which is insane to me. I think we need to have a real conversation about what you're really trying to avoid and what you're really protecting. What you're protecting is not my safety. What you're trying to avoid is liability. So let's just have a real conversation about that. Because that would be a better argument. I would be able to take that on board easier. If you're saying to me, hey, this is not good if you fall, I don't want you to sue us. I don't want to be liable for injuries if you fall off of this ramp. I would be able to understand that argument. But you're saying to people that it's for the safety of the non-disabled people to get into wheelchairs. They have perfectly functioning legs that have worked for their whole lives. You're standing on the lift without being in a wheelchair. There were 5 empty folded wheelchairs in this PAU truck because they need to cater for non-disabled people to be in wheelchairs. And they're saying it's a safety issue. I'm calling bullshit on that. This is why I'm making the argument that it's not about safety, that it's about liability, because when my mom said to them in the whole discussion and argument, she said, do you as PAU assistant people, do you get danger pay for standing on this lift? Because if she has to get in a wheelchair, why is it safe for them and not for her? And what they said was, no, we don't get danger pay, but we are insured. And passengers are not insured. I'm gonna let you draw your own conclusions about that. At this point, it's really frustrating to me that these are the conversations that we have to have because it's so unnecessary, and every person that we spoke to in this trip, when we said it to them, they were all like, no, we know it doesn't make sense, but it's the policy. And that's absurd to me. People know that it's ridiculous, and they have no option but to follow the policy because some people upstairs in a big room decided that that was the way to go. I don't understand. And it makes me really tired. And I'm not gonna not travel anymore, but I don't think we're going to go through Lanseria Airport anytime soon again. But I think they really need to have a revision of their policies and at least put it in the right category. Like, stop pretending it's about my safety. It's just not. Here's to many more adventures and much more advocacy and sharing the stories of what it means to be a disabled traveler and where priorities should be placed. So let me know if you've had any ridiculous experiences like this. I'm so here for it. I'm really ready to have these conversations and to make some positive change and let disabled people travel easily and not have to argue every step of the way. So let's see how long that takes.